I just wanted a meal and nobody else had to show their ID.
I needed to be sure you were trustworthy.
This is unfair and discriminatory.
Since he didn't show his ID, I denied him service.
Everyone else is eating just fine. I just wanted on record that this is how I was treated.
I was just protecting my...
It was a Tuesday night, the kind of evening that promised quiet elegance and impeccable service. Instead, it delivered a stark, unforgiving lesson in prejudice. Dr. Elias Thorne, a man who had dedicated his life to advancing scientific understanding, found himself facing an indignity that transcended the simple act of dining. His credentials, his achievements, his very presence were deemed insufficient by one woman's biased gaze. This woman, Sarah Jenkins, owner and proprietor of the Gilded Spoon, had cultivated a reputation, not just for her upscale establishment, but for something far more troubling. Her record, if one were to examine it through the lens of public accountability, bore a striking resemblance to the complaint history of an officer routinely accused of misconduct. 11 complaints, meticulously logged by the local Chamber of Commerce and various online review platforms, painted a disturbing picture. 11 instances where patrons, predominantly those of color, felt targeted, dismissed, or outright disrespected. 11 times the red flags were raised, yet the system, as it often does, allowed her persist. Dr. Elias Thorne, on the other hand, was the embodiment of achievement, a leading astrophysicist, a celebrated author, a man whose work graced the pages of prestigious journals and whose lectures commanded global attention. He had earned his position, his respect, his right to move through the world unburdened by baseless suspicion. Yet, on that Tuesday night, inside a restaurant he had chosen for its supposed sophistication, he was treated with a dismissiveness usually reserved for trespassers, for those deemed unworthy. He was asked to prove his right to exist in that space, a demand rooted not in policy, but in prejudice. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. Your engagement fuels our mission to expose these systemic failures and demand accountability. The story unfolds in Viridian City, a sprawling metropolis where ambition gleams from every skyscraper and innovation hums beneath the surface. It was a crisp October evening, the kind where the last vestiges of autumn clung to the trees, their leaves a riot of amber and crimson, before surrendering to the inevitable chill winter. Inside the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant nestled in the city's affluent uptown district, the atmosphere was typically a carefully curated blend of hushed conversations, clinking silverware and the subtle aroma of truffle oil. Tonight, however, that veneer of civility was about crack, revealing the ugly underbelly of ingrained bias. Dr. Elias Thorne, at 48 years old, was a man whose intellect was as expansive as the cosmos he studied. A distinguished professor at the prestigious Viridian Institute of Technology, he held the endowed Hawking Chair in Theoretical Astrophysics. His academic journey began with a scholarship to Yale, culminating in a Ph.D. from Harvard, where his dissertation on dark matter-particle interactions reshaped foundational theories. He had served on multiple NASA advisory boards, published 3 best-selling books popularizing complex scientific concepts, and was widely considered a leading contender for future Nobel recognition. His philanthropic endeavors were equally impressive, having founded the Starlight Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to STEM education for underserved youth. Dr. Thorne was not merely successful. He was a titan in his field, a celebrated public intellectual, and a beacon of achievement. He had, unequivocally, earned his position, not just in the academic world, but in any space he chose to occupy. Sarah Jenkins, the 52-year-old owner of the Gilded Spoon, presented a stark contrast. Her professional history, while superficially successful, was marred by a consistent pattern of customer complaints that suggested a deeply troubling bias. According to internal records obtained from the Viridian City Chamber of Commerce and corroborated by multiple legal filings, Jenkins' establishment had accumulated a disturbing dossier of grievances over the past 5 years. In March 2018, a black family celebrating graduation was denied a prime table, despite having a reservation and the table visibly open, with Jenkins citing a nebulous dress code violation that was not enforced against similarly attired white patrons seated moments later. The family's subsequent complaint detailed overt racial profiling. Then, in July 2019, a prominent black entrepreneur attempting to pay with a corporate card was questioned extensively by Jenkins, who publicly doubted the card's legitimacy, only to process it without issue after the customer threatened to call the police. The entrepreneur later recounted the humiliation, stating, "It felt like she couldn't fathom someone like me having access to such resources." A more severe incident occurred in November 2020, when Jenkins verbally assaulted a black delivery driver, accusing him of theft over a misplaced order, unleashing a tirade of racially charged microaggressions that left the driver shaken and prompted a formal complaint from his employer. Most recently, in May 2022, a black couple celebrating their anniversary were subjected to repeated, intrusive questioning about their reservation and ordering preferences, making them feel unwelcome and scrutinized throughout their meal, a stark departure from the service provided to tables around them. The pattern was clear: a consistent thread of suspicion, disrespect, and discriminatory treatment directed overwhelmingly at black patrons. These were not isolated incidents. They were systemic reflections of a deeply entrenched bias that had been allowed to fester unchecked within the walls of the Gilded Spoon. On that fateful Tuesday, October 24th, at precisely 7:17 p.m., Dr. Elias Thor arrived at the Gilded Spoon. He had a reservation for one, an annual tradition he held to celebrate the completion of a particularly demanding research cycle. He was dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a subtle silk tie, the very picture of understated elegance. His activity was mundane, legitimate, and entirely unremarkable. He simply wished to enjoy a quiet dinner. He was promptly seated at a small, intimate table near the window. A waiter brought him a menu and a glass of sparkling water. Dr. Thorne, a creature of habit, decided on the pan-seared scallops and a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. He was reviewing a few notes on his phone, preparing for an upcoming lecture, when Sarah Jenkins herself approached his table. Her smile, initially polite, seemed to tighten as she looked at him, her gaze lingering for a beat too long. "Good evening, sir," she began, her voice carrying an edge that fell out of place in the otherwise serene dining room. "I apologize for the interruption, but I'm going to need to see some identification." Dr. Thorne looked up, surprised. "Identification? For what purpose, madam? I have a reservation, and I've just been seated." "It's simply our policy," Jenkins insisted, though her eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding direct contact. "A new measure we've implemented. We've had issues with patrons recently." "Issues?" Dr. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "I assure you, I am a legitimate patron. My name is Dr. Elias Thorne, and I have a reservation under that name." He offered to show her the confirmation on his phone. Jenkins waved a dismissive hand. "Anyone can make a reservation, and anyone can fake a confirmation. I need to see a government-issued ID, Dr. Thorne." Her tone was firm, almost accusatory. Dr. Thorne felt a prickling heat rise within him. He was acutely aware that no other diner, all of whom appeared to be white, had been subjected to such a demand. He calmly pulled out his wallet, extracting his driver's license and his university ID. "Here is my driver's license, and this is my faculty identification from the Viridian Institute of Technology." Jenkins snatched the driver's license, barely glancing at it before handing it back. "And the university ID? Anyone can fake that. A student ID, perhaps, but a faculty ID for that position?" Her voice dripped with thinly veiled skepticism, her gaze raking over him with an unmistakable disdain. "I'm afraid I'll need something more substantial, or I cannot serve you." A hush had fallen over the tables nearby. Conversations had dwindled to whispers. Several patrons, their expressions a mix of confusion and discomfort, were now openly watching the exchange. Among them were Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, a retired couple known for their civic engagement, and a group of young professionals, all of whom recognized Dr. Thorne from his public lectures. They exchanged glances, their unease palpable. Dr. Thorne's voice, though still controlled, now carried the weight of profound indignation. "Madam, this is outrageous. I am a distinguished professor, a respected member of this community. I have presented you with two valid forms of identification. This demand is not based on policy. It is based on prejudice." Jenkins scoffed. "Prejudice? Sir, I am merely ensuring the integrity of my establishment. I have a right to refuse service to anyone, for any reason, Or for a discriminatory reason? Dr. Thorne retorted, his patience wearing thin. At that moment, the tension in the room was electric. A waiter, sensing the escalating conflict, had discreetly called 911. Within minutes, the soft glow of emergency lights began to pulse through the restaurant's large front windows. Two uniformed officers, Officer Miller and Sergeant Davies, entered. The body cam footage, which would later shock millions, began rolling the moment they stepped inside. Sergeant Davies, a seasoned officer with a reputation for de-escalation, immediately assessed the situation. He saw a visibly distressed Dr. Thorne, a defiant Sarah Jenkins, and a room full of uncomfortable witnesses. His initial questions were direct and pointed. "What is the nature of the disturbance here, ma'am?" he asked Jenkins. She launched into a muddled explanation about unruly patrons and security protocols. Dr. Thorne, however, calmly interjected, explaining the discriminatory demand for ID. Sergeant Davies then turned to the other patrons. Mr. Henderson, without hesitation, corroborated Dr. Thorne's account, stating he had witnessed the entire, baseless interaction. Sergeant Davies, after a brief, tense exchange with Jenkins, made a decisive call. He instructed Officer Miller to take statements from Dr. Thorne and the witnesses. He then turned to Jenkins, his voice firm. "Ma'am, based on the accounts, it appears you are attempting to deny service without reasonable cause and potentially in violation of city anti-discrimination statutes. I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions or face further legal consequences." The immediate intervention of Sergeant Davies, recognizing the clear injustice, was crucial. He understood the optics, the law, and the potential for a volatile situation to spiral. This incident begs a critical question. Should business owners have the right to demand identification without cause? Or does that power, especially when exercised electively, open the door to unchecked discrimination? The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive, though the true reckoning would take weeks to unfold. Under the stern gaze of Sergeant Davies, Sarah Jenkins, realizing the gravity of the situation and the presence of police body cams, reluctantly backed down. She mumbled an offer to serve Dr. Thorne, but the moment had passed. Dr. Thorne, his dignity bruised but intact, politely declined, stating, "I will not dine in an establishment where my presence is conditional on a baseless demand for proof of my humanity." He calmly collected his belongings, thanked the officers, and left, followed by the silent, sympathetic gazes of the other patrons. The tension in the Gilded Spoon dissolved, replaced by a lingering shame. This incident raises another fundamental question. Should discriminatory business practices, once proven and documented, lead to automatic and permanent revocation of business licenses? The body cam footage, released by the Viridian City Police Department just 48 hours later following a public records request, exploded across social media. Within 24 hours of its release, the video garnered over 15 million views across platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Dear Thorne, hashtag The Gilded Spoon Racism, and hashtag Demand Your Dignity trended nationally. News outlets, from local affiliates to national cable networks, picked up the story, featuring Dr. Thorne's calm demeanor against Jenkins' aggressive dismissal. The restaurant online review scores plummeted from a respectable 4.2 stars to a devastating 1.1 stars overnight, inundated with thousands of one-star reviews detailing past discriminatory experiences or simply expressing outrage. Within days, Dr. Thorne's legal team, led by renowned civil rights attorney Marcus Holloway, filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Sarah Jenkins and the Gilded Spoon for racial discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of the city's Public Accommodations Act. The claims were meticulously detailed, citing the pattern of previous complaints and the clear evidence from the body cam footage. The suit sought not only monetary damages, but also a permanent injunction against Jenkins operating any public-facing business in Viridian City. The pressure mounted relentlessly. Within 3 weeks, facing overwhelming public condemnation, plummeting revenue, and the imminent threat of protracted legal battles, Sarah Jenkins and her legal team entered mediation. On December 12th, exactly 7 weeks after the incident, a settlement was reached. Dr. Elias Thorne was awarded $3.5 million, an amount widely reported as the largest settlement in Viridian City's history for a public accommodations discrimination case. The settlement included a non-disclosure agreement regarding specific details, but publicly acknowledged Jenkins's discriminatory conduct. The consequences for Sarah Jenkins were severe and immediate. On December 15th, the Viridian City Business Licensing Commission, citing a clear and egregious pattern of discriminatory practices and a demonstrable failure to uphold the standards of public service, issued a public statement. It declared, effective immediately, Sarah Jenkins' proprietor license for the Gilded Spoon is hereby revoked, and she is permanently barred from owning or operating any establishment requiring a public accommodations license within the city limits of Viridian. Her career as a restaurateur in Viridian City is terminated. This decertification from her profession was a stark warning to other business owners. The Gilded Spoon was forced to close its doors permanently on December 20th, a symbol of how swiftly public and institutional accountability can dismantle a career built on prejudice. Weeks after the settlement and the closure of the Gilded Spoon, Dr. Elias Thorne, always a man of measured words, delivered a powerful testimony during a public forum organized by the Viridian City Human Rights Commission. His voice, calm yet resonant, echoed to the packed auditorium. "If this can happen to me," he began, his gaze sweeping across the diverse audience, "a man with privilege, with education, with a platform, what then happens to those without? What happens to the young student trying to get a coffee, the single mother trying to buy groceries, the laborer simply seeking a meal after a long day?" This incident was not about my ID. It was about an insidious belief that some people, because of the color of their skin, must constantly prove their right to exist in public spaces. It was about the casual, dehumanizing power of prejudice. My hope is that my experience serves as a mirror, reflecting the biases that still plague our society and a catalyst for genuine, systemic change. His words were a poignant reminder that while the individual incident was resolved, the deeper societal wound remained. His testimony, coupled with the national attention the case received, sparked a crucial debate. Should incidents like these, revealing clear patterns of racial bias in public accommodations, trigger broader federal investigations into local business practices and regulatory oversight? Many argued that local commissions often lack the teeth or the resources to address such widespread issues effectively. The Viridian City Human Rights Commission, spurred by the public outcry and Dr. Thorne's powerful statement, launched an extensive review of its own oversight mechanisms. Their findings, released in February, were damning. They revealed systemic failures, an inadequate complaint tracking system that allowed repeat offenders like Jenkins to operate unchecked, insufficient mandatory anti-discrimination training for business owners, and a reactive rather than proactive approach to enforcing public accommodations laws. The Commission acknowledged that the system itself had enabled Jenkins's discriminatory practices for years. In response, the Viridian City Council, under immense public pressure, announced a series of sweeping reforms. A new city ordinance, dubbed the Thorne Act, was passed, mandating annual anti-discrimination and implicit bias training for all public-facing business owners and their staff. It also established a centralized, publicly accessible database for discrimination complaints, ensuring transparency and enabling early identification of problematic patterns. Furthermore, the Commission's enforcement powers were significantly expanded, allowing for swifter investigations and more stringent penalties, including automatic license revocation for repeat offenders. The saga of the Gilded Spoon and Sarah Jenkins is more than just a cautionary tale of individual prejudice. It is a stark illustration of how deeply ingrained bias can override all evidence, all credentials, and all common decency. It reveals a system that, for too long, allowed such bias to fester, enabling a pattern of discrimination that chipped away at the dignity of countless individuals. The consequences for Jenkins were severe. Her career dismantled, her reputation irrevocably stained, her business a casualty of her own bigotry. But the impact on Dr. Elias Thorne, while ultimately leading to a measured justice, highlights the enduring emotional and psychological toll that racial discrimination exacts. He, a man of profound accomplishment, was momentarily reduced to an object of suspicion, his very identity questioned because of the color of his skin. This incident and the subsequent reforms begged the question, what truly changes now? Will these new ordinances be rigorously enforced? Will the culture of implicit bias truly begin to shift? Or will new Sarah Jenkinses simply find new ways to subtly yet effectively discriminate? We propose a national standard, mandatory, federally certified racial sensitivity training for all businesses operating in public accommodation, with a public registry of compliance and violations. Should such a policy be implemented nationwide? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a testament to the power of speaking up, to the necessity of holding institutions and individuals accountable. We're not stopping, and neither should you. It's about more than just one restaurant owner. It's about all of us demanding a society where dignity is universal, and justice is not just a concept, but a lived reality.